You're listening to Accounted For, the Canadian podcast that explores the intangibles of every career. I'm your host, Daniel Lee. Hello. Hey everyone, welcome back to Accounted For. This is a podcast on a mission to expand your perspectives, have you question the status quo, and get you inspired for action for your own career. The podcast is part of OMD Ventures, my career platform that is continuously changing and getting updated. And if you'd like to find out more about what it is, as well as a way to get more involved, just go to omdventures.com, and there's various ways for you to get involved with the community, like signing up for the weekly newsletter to really be on top of everything I'm doing. The newsletter is actually evolving, and so the current version now actually includes more of a weekly update on top of all the various content material as well. So I actually go through kind of what actually happened in the week, as well as in how I'm planning to grow the platform itself. And so, yeah, that's just a better way for you to get connected with me. And also I'm starting to take questions to do a separate AMA, like an Ask Me Anything episode. So just go to omdventures.com/contact, or there's a separate reach out tab when you go to the website. Use that to send your questions my way, and I'll record a separate episode to actually answer your questions. So that's the way for me to get more involved with you, my listeners. Okay, so to the main event today. Our guest today is Henry Shi. He is the co-founder and CTO, the Chief Technology Officer of SnapTravel. As the name implies, SnapTravel is a travel company headquartered in Toronto that creates a seamless experience for you to book your hotel accommodations through easy instant messaging apps like Facebook and WhatsApp. So I've personally tried using it. You just practically go on their website, snaptravel.com, and you just pick whichever messaging tool you want to use. So I use Facebook Messenger, so I use that, and you're practically talking to like an AI bot, and it finds hotel deals for you. So that was pretty cool. So I use that to sift through the various options for my upcoming travels. So yeah, check it out. But the podcast is focused on Henry. So Henry and SnapTravel really made the news, I'd say. Well, they made like the news rounds when they raised their Series A round with Golden State's Steph Curry. I think that was just all over my LinkedIn feed. And another thing was Henry's acceptance into the Forbes 30 under 30 list. Both very big accomplishments, and I think that really put SnapTravel in my my front view mirror for sure. And I think SnapTravel's story itself has actually been very fascinating because the company is Henry's third startup company after he created two others while at the University of Waterloo's the Velocity Student Incubator and Canada's Next 36 program. So after his first two startups, Henry actually decided to take a startup sabbatical by getting a low-stress job at Google, something not many people really refer to as a sabbatical. But in our conversation, we actually go through the kind of decision-making process Henry had for actually choosing to go to work at Google instead of going to start his third startup immediately, as well as the various learnings he has had throughout the first two companies that he has started and how he actually took all that into creating SnapTravel as well. And then we actually go into talking about the early years of starting SnapTravel, like actually what was the process like finding a co-founder, what was the process like going through product market fit, or even just deciding how to even start a company. Where do you start with all that, and how the idea even came about. And then throughout the actual conversation and near the end as well, we actually touch upon the major mental model that Henry uses for many of his decision making that I found very fascinating and very enjoyable. And so without further ado, here is my conversation with Henry. Hey everyone, welcome to Accounted For. Today on the podcast we have Henry Shi. Hey Henry, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
No problem. Henry here is the co-founder and the Chief Technology Officer of SnapTravel. And so SnapTravel is a travel company that has more than 50 people in 3 different countries. But Henry, for people who aren't familiar with the company, can you help us understand what you guys do and where you're based out of the 3 countries?
Sure. So SnapTravel is a chatbot that helps customers get really good hotel recommendations and deals all over messaging. So there's no website, there's no app to download. You talk to our bot over Messenger, WhatsApp, Slack, iMessage, etc. Think of it as your virtual travel assistant, and the bot will understand what you say, source the web as well as our own deals to give you the best recommendations and the best prices for your hotel trip, for your hotel stay. That's kind of what we do in a nutshell. We have people in Toronto, that's the headquarters with our product engineering team and business team as well. And then we have a team in the Philippines for customer service. It's about 60 to 70 people right now. And then we have a few folks in Europe and Turkey for our supply team. So getting great inventory and hotel inventory.
Oh, okay. When you said supply, I was thinking, but what do you guys actually have in supply? It's not like you own the actual properties, right? So when you say supply, like hotel inventory.
Yeah, it's like contracts, sourcing deals, and discounted contracts and hotels, yes.
Is there a reason why it's in Turkey? Is that like the hub?
Europe actually is the hub. So I was just in Palma de Mallorca, Spain for work last week. So Palma is an island off the coast of Spain, and it's actually like the Silicon Valley for travel. This island has probably got like 500,000 people, and all the travel tech and travel companies are there. Some of the multi-billion-dollar companies on this island, and for those who don't know, it's kind of like the Cancun for Europe. So a lot of people go there for the beach, the sun, and it's a great, super, I guess, tourist-heavy spot. And because of that, this sort of bubble of tourism and travel tech emerged on this island. So that's why we have people in Spain, because a lot of people there speak Spanish. And it's from this sort of regional development, and then Middle East as well. Middle East is a huge market, and we knew somebody there who happened to be in Turkey, and then we kind of just started working together. And she covers our other sort of Middle Eastern and other, I guess, European markets.
Wow, that's fascinating. I had no idea about that. Like it seems so. I don't know. I guess if you're in the travel industry, it's a very obvious thing. But for someone like I travel a lot, I love travel. But yeah, that's definitely news for me.
It's a surprise when I first learned that as well. It's like, how can there be such a huge multi-billion-dollar company on this island? But it's just, you go there, everybody knows everybody in the travel space. It's a small world.
Wow. And so I'm actually going to Europe in October. So I'm going to be going to Germany and the Netherlands. And so I was actually thinking of using SnapTravel. So as a first-time user, do I just download an app and I just start like messaging people? Is that how you would guide me?
No, there's no app to download. That's the benefit of it, right? So people these days, they don't want to download an app. They don't want to browse it. There are 8 different sites. They don't want to, walk to Flight Center. They don't want to call. They don't want to do anything. They just want to chat all day. So all you do is you open your message or your Messenger or WhatsApp or iMessage. You talk to the SnapTravel bot. You say, hey, I'm going to, like you said, Netherlands or Germany on these dates. And the bot will give you a recommendation for those dates and the best deals.
Wow. And so should I constantly check every day to see if the deals change, or will the bot take care of that for me?
Sort of both. So we actually do follow up and give you recommendations like, hey, prices are changing, they're going up, they're going down. We do that for you. And you can also check. Some people love checking, some people don't. So it's up to you.
Wow. And so it seems that travel has kind of been a part of your life earlier on. Like you lived in China, the UK, Japan, and then Canada. I think like Toronto personally for me is the 6th city that I've lived in as well. Like I lived in South Korea, Hong Kong, and all throughout Canada. And for you then, like what was the reason for all that travel?
So growing up, I think my parents moved around a lot. So I was in UK because my dad was doing his postdoc, in Japan as well. And even within Canada, I was moving around. As new immigrants, you sort of find your footing, and my parents were moving around a lot. But I grew up mostly in Mississauga, went to Waterloo for university. But even then, I think for me, I lived in New York for a co-op. I lived in SF, lived in Hong Kong for an exchange. And I think just seeing the world and seeing how different people live and different cultures really opens your eyes in terms of what's out there. And I think that really helps you develop perspective.
Was there like a particular moment where you felt like, I think my travels kind of opened my eyes to this particular thing?
I think for me, I really like traveling to places with the really different and diverse cultures. And so one of my favorite spots to travel is India or Egypt, for example, because it's so different. Like, well, first of all, if you go to India, there's actually like no tourists. So it's when you walk around, you're like the only non-Indian person. And then everything is so like different. like the culture, the food, the sights, and it's just absolutely beautiful. People are nice, but it's the way to do things is all different, and I think that really opens my eyes. Comparing that to say going to London, which is a great city, but Canada, U.S., the culture comes from British culture, so you expect a lot of some very similar things, even though it's different, but it's still sort of European, Western civilization. Whereas if you go to India, if you go to Egypt, you really see different types of people's ways of lives and development and stuff. That's traveling, but I think for living, it's also kind of different for me. I think living in Toronto and New York and San Francisco really helped, and Hong Kong, like really truly global cities, helped me develop perspective. You have so much innovation and things going on, and that like living there really helps me develop a global perspective.
Yeah, I can definitely relate with that. Like, but yeah, going to places like Egypt and India and stuff, like, do you try to seek out places purposely that are difficult? Is that the mindset?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think maybe I was a bit spoiled. When I grew up, my parents took me on a lot of trips to like Europe, Paris, Rome, like the classic spots, and that's all great and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I think I learned that it's still kind of similar, and it's fun. The culture is great and very beautiful architecture and scenery and food and whatnot. But to really get a truly different experience, you really have to go out there. So India, I backpacked my own. I took the local train with it's like only for locals. Technically, you're not as a foreigner, you're not even supposed to be on the train. But I ended up getting a ticket from my friend who was a local. So I backpacking in India or going to Egypt right after they had a coup. So literally there were no tourists. It was like in 2013 when they just had a coup like 2 months ago, and it was great because you go to the pyramids, it's like 4 people. So I think for me, adventures has always been super exciting, and seeing the culture and the raw has been great. And one of the biggest, I still want to go to many parts of South America because it's so different, or parts of Africa and whatnot. So for me, I think traveling is about getting perspective and diverse ideas and experiences, and seeking out new adventures for me has always been really rewarding.
Is there like a particular kind of process? Like you have a hack for yourself where these are like the process that I follow to make sure that I have this kind of more authentic experience?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's, I call myself a checklist guy. So every time I go to a city, I actually spend no more than 2 days there because the third day is diminishing returns. I mean, that's why they have deals, right? Like if you look at the typical hotel deal, it's like stay 2 nights, get the third night free, because they know that the third night your marginal utility is so low that you rather just have it for free. So for me, I spend roughly at most 2 days in the city, and I just make sure I hit up all the highlights. Like what's the biggest thing, what's the most important thing. I mean, you still want to spend time like wandering around, talking to locals and whatnot, but for me, I think about it from a marginal, I guess, impact perspective, and the most popular, biggest things are some of the biggest things. So, for example, I just did a trip in Central Europe after my work in Palma. I went to Vienna for like a day, actually no, like 26 hours, right? So I went to the old town, did a tour, spent like 2 hours there, saw everything, and then I caught up with a friend who lived there, who showed me around, had some good local food. Next morning I went to the palace and came back, and that's it. You hit all the highlights, you talk to local people, you see the life, and you're done. What, like 24 hours? I mean, of course you should spend more time if you have the time, but for me, I think being able to do that in many different countries gives me it is the first sort of step towards getting insight. And then once you've seen everything, then you deep dive into a place or a city that you really want to explore.
Yeah, I like that. I can definitely relate with that, because when I first traveled, I was very much similar. Like, it was very focused on, okay, let's go to X many cities and try to really be super hyper efficient about everything. Like, I'd color code everything, try to plan all the most optimal routes so that we don't waste any time. And nowadays, but you bring up a good point where the first time it's just to kind of test it out to see like, is it good? And then deciding I'm going to go back. Like, I've been to Vienna twice, and I think I've probably spent a total of close to like 10 days worth in Vienna, like over the 2 trips. But I think that's also been an evolution where nowadays I try to just take longer in cities, and I just try to emulate my life in Toronto there. Like, I'll stay in coffee shops for 8 hours, just staring at people, drinking coffee, reading. But yeah, I think it's funny, like, you see here, like your travel style, because I can definitely I can definitely empathize with the decreasing marginal.
Well, there's a lot more to do, right? Like if you're trying to see, 100 different cities or 100 different countries, if you do the math, it's going to take you like 200 days.
Yeah.
Right. 200 days is a long time. So I think for me, that's why I say I'm a checklist guy, because I want to check more checklists. So until I do that, there's it's going to be tough spending more than 3 days in a city.
Yeah, I can definitely agree. And so then this checklist guy mindset, I'm wondering, like, did it kind of stem from like an early childhood? Like, were you always kind of a checklist guy? Like, I know your parents are both very, like, I would say in the technical fields. Like, your mother is in computer science. Your father is an aerospace engineer. So you even have like a postdoc as well. So it seems like a hyper intellectual technical family.
I think, to be honest, probably it came from my. So I actually did a joint major in economics, and I think a lot of the economic thinking about utility maximization, thinking about marginal, I think that was the biggest lesson. Plus, you take that with startups. So when you're running a lean startup, you're thinking about, how do I build MVPs? How do I iterate? How do I test the hypothesis really quickly, right? So I think you combine the two together, you end up becoming like a checklist guy, because you're saying, okay, how do I get the most, marginal utility with the least risk in the most fast iterative way possible, right? And how do you do that when you travel? Well, it's you go to a city for 2 days and you hit all the highlights, and you spend time with a friend locally, right? You crash with a friend, you save money, you spend time with a local friend, and then you hit all the highlights in the day, and then so I think it's a combination of that. But I'd say my education in economics, I think, helped shape a lot of that learning, and I find it to be still helpful even today, because I think a lot of times people don't think about the margin. It's like, oh, this is $2 off, but $2 off of $2 is like $4 is 50%, right? You think about things on the margin, it really changes the way you think about things, and I think that's mostly for good. Sometimes not good, but mostly I think it's taught me to think about things on a more marginal perspective.
Mm-hmm. And so you did economics in Waterloo, but you also did computer science there as well. Yeah. And did you want to always be go down that computer science path as like a child? Like, I'm just guessing that with parents with such like technical backgrounds, that you would have been just heavily exposed to that at such an early age. So that might have been tough to kind of think about anything else. But I'm just wondering, what did you want to be when you were young?
Yeah, I think actually it's funny, because when I was going to undergrad, I actually wanted to do some sort of business thing or accounting. So I think it's because back then, I guess back then, this was like 2010, finance was all the cool stuff, right? All the coolest kids, smartest kids go into finance because you make a bunch of money. But now it's computer science, so it's kind of different. But before then, computer science was not cool. It was not what the cool kids did. But for me, so I actually wanted to go, I applied for mostly business programs, and I wanted to do accounting at Waterloo. But for some reason, I think I ended up applying for computer science, maybe because my mom, she's a computer scientist, so she kind of said, hey, Waterloo's really known for that, so you should at least apply for the program they're well known for. So I was like, okay, fine. So I apply, and then what happened was I ended up getting a scholarship. But that requirement was that you had to study something in STEM. And I must say that probably saved my life. Changed my life. That's a better word. Because what ended up happening was that little did I know that the world would change so much between like 2008 and like 2014, because we didn't have iPhone just launched. Facebook was just becoming a thing. Google was still building their brand, and I think just the world changed entirely. And all of a sudden, people are getting paid a lot, and you can build startups, and startups are going IPO, becoming unicorns. The world changed so fast in the last 10 years, and I think I was super lucky to be caught on the forefront of that, all because of, I guess, my parents' inclination plus some scholarship that ended up having a requirement. So I got really fortunate, and I think that's kind of how it happening. I actually didn't, I wasn't one of those kids where I was programming when I was 6. I think I only started programming maybe in like grade 11 or 12, and I think I only built my first like actual program or website or something usable like in like second year. So it's not like I was one of those whiz kids building programs for like 20 years. It's not like that. I think I just ended up learning a lot, building things, and getting really into the sort of builder startup iterative mentality.
That's so fascinating that you say that, because I went to accounting in Waterloo, and so it's really possible that we could have actually been classmates. But I think the even funnier part is my situation was exactly like yours, but the opposite. So I spent all of my high school preparing to be an engineer. Like I did all the physics, I did all the calculus, all the competitions, and I applied to accounting as like just a backup, like on a whim. Just like I was like, oh, they have accounting. Business sounds cool. I'll apply to that. But I had only focused on engineering, and then when all the offers came, engineering gave me more money for scholarships than accounting did. But I just made a decision just last minute to go, I think I'm gonna go to business instead. And then I just switched in, and oh man, I still talk with my engineering friends about, man, I wonder how different my life might have turned out if I had taken engineering then. But because you're right, like when we were in school, I remember when my friends started first getting like co-op jobs at Facebook, it wasn't even that cool then. It was, they were at Facebook and you say, oh, okay, cool, yeah, it's a startup company. And then over time, as like 2014, 2015 hit, like it started becoming like that big thing where everyone's like, oh yeah, you want to be in this field, you want to go into software. And it's funny, like, now that you put in perspective of that pivotal moment from 2008 to like 2014, like, yeah, I think people were kind of licking their wounds on the financial meltdown after 2008, but business was still like that prominent memory then. But it seems like, so for you, like you still had that kind of inkling or some kind of interest in business because your co-op terms were at Bloomberg and I think it was like LendUp, like they both seem to be like very finance oriented. So I'm wondering, did you have this kind of pull to that kind of business, kind of finance world?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when I still studied economics, so I was gonna get a minor, but then I looked at it, I was like, well, it's only like 4 more courses to get a major, so I might as well just get a major. And that was sort of, I guess, more checklist guy mentality. But yeah, so I ended up doing that. And so for me, business has always been interesting. And I think technology is great, and I like technology, but ultimately it has to create value and be used by people and create value. And ultimately, I think a lot of business is about how do you actually take something cool and new and innovative and create value out of it. So that's kind of what I wanted to do. And in terms of the co-op stuff, yeah, I think initially I still want to do some more finance related stuff. So actually I was going to be in the CFM program actually, which is like a computational financial management program. That's why I did a term in Scotia Bank on some back office stuff for trading, and then I did a term in Bloomberg. But the thing about Bloomberg is, and this is I think something that's maybe changed my perspective, is when I was going for Bloomberg, one of the recruiters was a Waterloo alum, and he was sort of a team lead of Bloomberg Sports, which is a startup within Bloomberg. So he convinced me to join the startup team because, if you move faster, get more things done. So I thought, okay, this is really cool. I'll give it a shot. So I ended up doing Bloomberg Sports, and that's when I kind of first worked at a startup. So even though it was a big company, Bloomberg's a big company, it was a startup team within Bloomberg. And that was really cool because I got to see them build a product, scratch, well, not from scratch, but build a product and really work on something cool, innovative, and have make an impact instead of just being one of the 10,000 employees. That was kind of really cool. So even though it was Bloomberg, it was within a startup. And LendUp as well. LendUp is a startup that I joined when there were just like 10 people, just came in YC. And again, same thing, it's a startup, had great founders, and I thought I could learn a lot. And seeing that growth from 10 people to raising their Series A, and I think now they're probably raised like 200 plus million, hundreds of employees. It's just such an incredible journey. And I think that's where the startup factor played more an effect or influenced me more than, say, the financial aspect.
Mm-hmm. And so then was it after that period where you decided, okay, I'm going to apply to Next 36 to try to create my own startup? And did you mention your first company come out of that?
Sort of, yes and no. So I've always been doing startups in sort of through junior achievement, which is the high school program where you build a company. And that's sort of more of a traditional business, right? Where you come with an idea, you have a VP finance, VP marketing, VP sales, VP, I think they call it VP of IT back then, and then a CEO, whatever. So it's a very traditional business where you go and you sell, you make a product, you build it and you sell it. And I think that's something that, but it's the process that matters, right? It's the process of coming with an idea, doing the sales, building the product, and then ultimately, issuing the shareholder, paying them back and stuff. So that's really cool. But I'd say that that was my first sort of entry into startups, but the first real sort of foray into actually building a company or a tech company was through Next 36. So I think I was applying for it in my second year because one of my friends heard about it, had applied, so I thought it was pretty cool, let me give it a try. So I ended up doing the program, and that's when I first actually had a team, built the tech product and had some capital to build it. But looking back then, that I was like, I don't even know what I was building, which is so. I was so naive, I guess. It was just, we're trying to build some SaaS tool for enterprise HR learning development. But looking back, I was like, I don't even know what I was building. I didn't solve a problem. I didn't understand the problem and didn't know what we were building. So it was a really good learning experience, but I would say it was probably a terrible company. So taking that lesson, I finished the program in 2012. And then I met my co-founder for you mentioned through a mutual friend. And you mentioned was more my earlier somewhat early success. So you mentioned is a social mobile network that helps people meet friends. That was your original vision and goal, is to help people meet friends in a semi-anonymous manner. So you could be anonymous, but you had to be verified that you are part of the network, so part of the school, whatever it is. So it's kind of to create a safe space, and that's what we started with. We launched, people liked it. But ultimately, we found that most people didn't actually need friends, or they got their friends and then they left the platform because people, just need a group. They don't need to continuously make new friends. So we thought, okay, well, if people didn't want friends, why were they staying? The people who did stay, well, they stayed because of the memes, the funny pictures, and the gossip, and the juicy content. Well, we're like, well, if that's what they want, they don't want the friendship. Let's just, pivot. So we made a mobile app. It's kind of like Tinder meets Yik Yak. And so basically the same thing, location based, but you could share posts anonymously. And then that really took off. It was really big in the South, like Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. And
you built it here, but then it took off in the South.
Yeah, because it has a really big party culture, a sports culture, frat culture, and we had a sort of campus growth guy who was based in Atlanta. He's from Atlanta, and he helped grow in a lot of schools there. But essentially, what it became was a way for people to share news and hook up and gossip. And I was like, there's nothing wrong with that, but I really wasn't sure if I wanted to spend the next 5 years of my life helping people share news, hook up, and gossip. So I decided to take a step back, figure out what I want to do, and that's when I decided to join Google.
Wow. And so you mentioned, is that was it part of the Velocity program?
Yeah, it was. So that was part of Velocity, which is an awesome experience. I think I met a lot of great people, great friends from Velocity. Velocity is an incubator residence and workspace out of Waterloo, or University of Waterloo. So they have a residence where you can live in, and just like a hacker community where you live in and you can work on stuff. And they have a garage space where you can actually work there as a sort of a company.
Yeah, look, it's funny. I had a call with like a student in Waterloo, and she's like just about to go into second year, and I was telling her, I really wish I took more advantage of the Waterloo like school entrepreneurship programs like Velocity, for example. I told her like try to look into that, because my experience with Velocity was very brief. Like, I think our startup, we can't even call it a startup. Like, we had a site, we had everything. It was textbook selling. Like, that thing was like the rage back then. So I was like the head of marketing, and I think that company maybe lasted like 3 months or 4 months. And then the tech guy said, "Screw it, we're not going to build this out." But for you, like you mentioned actually was being used by people. Like, you had traction, and so then did you just decide to just shut it all down and just move away from it?
Yeah, so I mean, it was kind of big. It was pretty big in the South, and I think it was doing like a couple of million pages a day. But what happened was, when you look at it, you project it out. Well, it's like, well, we're here today. We're still very early. We got to get to 50, 100 million pages a day, and then even on top of that, we got to keep growing. And we're we're burning money when nobody's making money. How do we sustain that, right? So it's really hard and it's really tricky. And if you look at Yik Yak now, they raised like 60 million from Sequoia, and then they died, went like nothing. So it's really hard. It's a really hard space, and the combination of the change in the mission from helping people meet and make friends into help people gossip and hook up, it's quite a different mission. So I thought maybe I want to take a step back and figure out what I want to do. So I decided to take a sabbatical, if you will, go to the valley, be around smart people, figure out what I want to do, and then my co-founders continued with the startup. So they continued running it, and then pivoted to like messaging, and then they eventually sort of winded it down like 2 years later.
And I love that you called going to Google a sabbatical. And this, I actually am fully in agreement with that. I think labeling, because I have friends in Silicon Valley, and they describe it in a very similar way, and that's what I also like tell like younger folks as well, like when they do like big companies, because I think there are ways to be entrepreneurial and make things happen, but at the same time, when you join such like big behemoths, it's, you can just kind of go under the radar. And there are a lot of times when it takes a really, really long time to really get anything done. I think when we first chatted, you told me about how like it could take as long as like 8 months for you to like even build a product or like get something rolled out.
Yeah. I mean, I think Google's a great company, a lot of smart people, but ultimately it's a big company, and it's just hard to get things done. There's more things, more legacy systems, more stakeholders, a lot of process, bureaucracy, and ultimately, it's like, it's pretty chill. There's no stress, and you could work as hard as you want, or not very hard, depending on what you want to do. And there's free food, so it's kind of like, it's like a sabbatical.
Yeah, it's a great sabbatical. You get great pay, great perks. Like when I took my sabbatical, I had no pay.
Yeah, but also you have, it's hard because it's tough because I think as a young person who's motivated to get things done, it can also be very frustrating, right? Yeah. Because you're trying to push things through. But you can't, or it's hard, and it can be frustrating.
I'm imagining though, like you must have known that, it would be like that, or was it a big shocker?
I think it's still pretty surprising because when you hear about it, you're like, wow, it's the Google flex, and it's everybody's supposed to be happy, and you're supposed to be really smart, some of the smartest people in the world, which is not untrue, but ultimately, if you think about it now, I like to joke that Google is the new Microsoft. Microsoft's the new IBM. So as companies get to a certain scale, you have to deliver on certain types of results or financial impact, and you have to work on features that ultimately aren't so life changing. Which is not saying they're not important, but it's just not the original sort of I guess vibe or culture. And also I was surprised because it's super flexible and super chill, so you could literally work really, really hard or not at all.
And so for you, like after you finished your startup, like did you not want to join another fast growing startup?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the reason why I didn't want to join a fast growing startup is because I knew I wanted to do my own startup at some point, and I feared that if I joined, say, Airbnb or Uber or whatever, I'm going to be sort of golden handcuffed, right? Because it's every year is like next year's IPO, so you're there, and shortly, do you know it? You've been there for like 5 years, and you're like 30. You're like, wow, what am I mean, you probably still get a good payout and whatnot, but ultimately, it's like I knew that it's something I want to do for a short time, like a year. I didn't want to have the pressure or the sort of psychology of being locked in because of some future payout.
And how I'm wondering, like, did you see this kind of stuff happen? Is that why you were able to see it ahead of time? Because I asked because, I think maybe it's the benefit of co-op, but I still think it's a very tough thing for most people to grasp when they're going into their kind of first full-time role out of school. Like I think predominantly they believe that the brand first pay is going to come, but you were able to kind of think through all this stuff ahead of time logically.
Well, I think the brand definitely still there, right? So joining Google was a big part, was Sabbatical, but also the branding, which I have to admit does help, right? And in terms of the vesting, I guess being locked in, I think that was for me just seeing some of my older peers who like, hey, like after like 3 years, why are you still there? Like you're not very happy, and you tell me you want to quit, but why haven't you quit yet, right? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it's just like at the end of the day, people are sort of creatures of habit, and they're motivated by the reward system that's designed to motivate them, right? And then these companies know, like Google knows exactly how much to pay you, so that way you're happy, but you're not like, you're not like FU money, and they know just when you're gonna quit, they give you more. Right? Like for example, when I was there, I was like, well, I was thinking about when to quit, but then there's like never a good time to quit because there's Christmas bonus, and then there's vacation, and then there's like a refresh in March, and there's a promo in like June, and like you're always like just when you're about to quit, like, oh no, I got something else for you. So I think it's really hard, and it's designed that way, right? It's designed that way to keep people motivated, which it's just that's how people are ultimately behave in ways that the reward systems are designed.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And if I were to quote Charlie Munger, the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, he says, if you have to work on one thing in your entire life, just work on incentives, because that's going to drive everything. And humans are predictably irrational.
Yeah.
But for you, like, what does it mean to be an entrepreneur, to create your own startup? Like, why was it such an important thing?
Yeah, I think it's a question. I think it's really an important question too, because as Mark Zuckerberg says, don't start a startup for the sake of starting a startup. And I think sometimes we're caught up in the fantasy of doing a startup and being your own boss, but I think for me, it's sort of like just the entrepreneurial bug. Like once you get bit once, you can't ever let go. I think a lot of it comes down with the creative process of building something from nothing and seeing the fact that this thing never would have existed without you and the team and putting together the great people behind it. And you created something that people like and value. And as you mentioned, we help people make lifelong friends. People actually got married because they met on Umention, right? And that's a lasting impact. So I think that's really cool, and that's something that it's hard to achieve elsewhere. However, I would say that if your goal is to say, make a scientific breakthrough or make a huge impact on hundreds of millions of people, yeah, maybe there are better places for that, like a research lab or like, a big company. Like if you're the person in charge of, I don't know, just say newsfeed ranking on Facebook, that's a huge impact, right? Probably much bigger than I could ever get, as you mentioned. So I think it depends on what you want to do and how you want to achieve that. But for me, it's the sort of creating something from nothing that's super exciting and compelling.
And so you left Google after about 15 months. You left in 2015, I think it was like October. And I think SnapTravel kind of came into official being sometime like April of 2016. Right. So then for that 7 months, what was happening?
Sure. So while at Google, I actually spent a lot of time trying to find my next co-founder or early startup. So I had a sort of a spectrum of next steps from co-founding a company to joining a company as a first employee or whatnot. So throughout the 6 months, I probably talked to like 100 people with a notebook like this thick about ideas, people, process, and really detailed notes on that. And I think I ended up meeting my current co-founder about half a year in, and we just really got along in terms of common values, ideas, goals, beliefs, whatever. And we decided that we knew that we wanted to work together. So we came together, and even then we were working like part-time after work, whatever, for about half a year before we said, okay, yeah, we are sure about this. So I quit my job. He joined me in SF, and we hit the ground running. So when I quit, we had no idea and no industry. Just like, we'll figure some shit out.
So then, sorry to interrupt, but so then you and Hussein, like you guys just said, all right, we like each other. We share the similar views, values. Right. Let's just work together. No idea.
So we were testing a bunch of things in the background. Some like random like food delivery stuff and whatever. But we're like, yeah, we're not really getting anywhere unless we do it full time. So like, okay, fuck it, let's just do it full time. So we quit. I quit my job on Friday. He flew here on Sunday, and we hit the ground running on Monday. So we're like talking to customers, ideating, starting from nothing, right? Just like lean startup. What's your problem? What's your hypothesis? How do we build it? How do we validate? Talk to customers, talk to users, and just iterate on that process. And yeah, it's a process, but that took 6 months to get here. So the first 3 months we did a SaaS tool. It's like I guess a better version of Mechanical Turk for task labeling and automation. That's something we did for the first 6 months. It's okay, I got some revenue, but realized it wasn't really scalable, so we decided to kill it, restart. And in January 2016, we met the ex-CEO of Hotels.com. So with them, we were brainstorming some hotel ideas, and that's how we got into the hotel space. And then Facebook just launched the Messenger SDK, where you could build bots on Facebook. And that's kind of how we put everything together, sort of in the hotel space with the automation of the chatbot stuff, and then that's how it came together.
It's almost kind of like a fairy tale. Like you needed that stuff to kind of all work out. But if we even take it back to then I'm going to take it a little further back. You said you had a notebook of hundreds of people that you wanted to talk to.
Yeah. Well, maybe not hundreds, maybe like a couple dozen. But yeah.
Was the whole purpose to just find a co-founder? Was that it?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's kind of like dating. It's like you have to talk to a lot of people to know yourself, what you value, and make sure there's a good fit.
Why did you want a co-founder?
I think for me, solo founders are hard in general. It's well known that it's quite hard to be a solo founder. And for me, I was pretty young. I think like 22, 23 back then. So having somebody to bounce ideas off with, to work with, learn from is I think an invaluable experience. So yeah.
So what are these conversations like when you meet people that could be, like kind of like marriage? Do you want to start a company with me?
Yeah, I think it's actually better than dating because you can be very upfront about it, right? Because in dating, you can't be like, hey, do you want to get married? Like, what are your thoughts on this? But for a company, you can, right? Because you both know you have some sort of intent to build something great together. So you just, talk about like yourself, your background, kind of like this interview, right? Like your story, my story. How do we work well together? What are your thoughts? And some people have ideas, right? So you talk about, they pitch their idea to you, you poke holes in it, you discuss it, you iterate, you brainstorm. So it really depends on the process. But yeah, generally it is about learning process of learning about each other, learning about your ideas and your values and what kind of business you want to build.
And what about Hussein like really ignited some kind of feeling in it?
I think part of it was too just that. I mean, he had my co-founder had a lot of experience, built a company before, sold it, but he was still super down to earth and super sort of super down to earth, super hardworking, and sort of ready to grind. And I think that combination of experience plus the humility and plus the drive, I think, is really rare. And we just got along in terms of wanting to build a big company, a fast growing company.
So I'm guessing you're probably talking to multiple people, and then over time, was it like a process of, all right, people are kind of falling off and you're realizing more about how people really work, and then Hussein was kind of the last one remaining where you're like, I have a gut feeling about Hussein, this is it.
Yeah.
Or was it another checklist?
I mean, I don't know about the last one per se, but it's actually really rare. Like it's kind of like dating, right? Like you have a lot of first dates, but very few second dates and very few third dates, and then people you see for a month and whatnot. So similarly, you meet a lot of people for the first time, right? And more than half of them you probably never talk to again. And then other people who are somewhat interested, you have a follow-up call, maybe you do a working session together, right? You meet in person, whatever it is. But it's a process, and you work through it. But I'd say I probably had 3 or 4 other teams or co-founders that I got pretty deep with in terms of ideation, working on things, hacking on things together. But it's really rare.
And so then after you guys Hussein comes down to SF, you guys are working on you quit Google, you have the first company, it's generating revenue.
Right.
I can't imagine it being an easy thing to kill when it seems to be somewhat working. Or what's the decision criteria there to kill something that you've worked so hard on and it's actually working to some degree?
Yeah, I think that's where perspective comes in, right? I think for me, because all my startups have been sort of social and non-monetization startups. So for me, any revenue is great. But I think my co-founder, that's where perspective really helps is, he's built a company that's done, hundreds of millions of sales. So for him, it's getting, if it's this hard to get, I think it was $500 a month, whatever, then it's probably not very scalable, right? Because we had to do a lot of custom work, we had to do a long sales cycle, and ultimately it was a service that nobody cared about. We were I think we were helping them classify and filter out images for some dating app, and just they have all these users and they spend all this money on marketing, but they didn't want to spend a couple hundred or a couple $1,000s on this stuff, right? So we thought, well, ultimately we're tackling a cost center, and this is something that people don't care that much about, and we had to do so much custom work that it wasn't scalable, or we couldn't see a path to a fast scaling company.
And when I look at a lot of other founders, I think it's a common theme where founders tend to try to scratch their own itch, find problems that irk them. And I'm wondering, was that the same process for you? You kind of said that you didn't really have a particular industry that you're focusing on, but did you find that you guys were kind of levitating around problems that really impacted? Is that how the travel space came about, meeting the ex-CEO of Hotels.com?
Yeah, I think with the first company, the SaaS tool, that was actually came from my experience at YouTube, where I was doing something similar for music annotations. And the system that we had was custom built in-house. It was kind of janky and ultimately wasn't great. And it's okay, well, a lot of people need annotations. How do you make it better, right? And actually, fun fact, there's a company, Scale AI, that just raised $100 million on this thing 2 weeks ago. So it's funny how everything comes full circle. But so I mean, that also tells you it's all about execution, right? Ideas change, you pivot and you iterate, but execution matters a lot. So that's kind of how that one got started. For the hotel stuff, that was actually quite different. That was much more based on customer behavior. So we had, we were brainstorming with Scott Brooker, the ex-CEO of Hotels.com, on some last-minute reverse bidding ideas. But then what we did was we built the landing page and got people to come to it and try to get them to use our site. But people, instead of using our website, they just emailed us their travel plans. They're like, hey, I'm going to New York. What do you have for me? And we thought, well, if people still wanted to email instead of using the website, how do we make it better, right? How do we bring back the travel agent experience but have the scalability of an OTA like Expedia, all through this sort of chat platform? So that's kind of how we got to that idea. It was less of a maybe scratch my own itch, but more about observing the user behavior and then going from there.
So then the ex-CEO of Hotels.com, did you just coincidentally come upon him and he kind of told you about a problem in the area? Is that how it happened?
Not quite. We actually reached out to him on LinkedIn, just kind of cold, and he was kind of doing, I think, an EIR at some firm as well. So he was super nice. And I think one thing we learned
EIR
is that,
as in entrepreneur in residence?
Yeah. I think one of the things you learn is that people are actually friendlier than their titles appear. Like there's people who are very approachable even though they're very senior. And I think generally people just want to help. So we got in touch with him, we were brainstorming some ideas, and that's how we got into the first reverse bidding idea. But that wasn't what eventually emerged.
Wow. So then I'm guessing when you first reached out to him, was it just that he's an interesting person and you could learn something from him?
It was because hotel companies were potential clients of our old SaaS company, because hotel companies had a lot of humans who needed to label the catalog. Right? That's kind of how it came together.
Oh wow. Talk about weird serendipity.
Yeah.
And so then after you decided, okay, you guys are going to do SnapTravel, and then you ended up raising some seed money, and is that when you decided to move back to Toronto?
Yeah, it's a combination. So I think, I quit my job and I had to switch my visa and then we were there for 6 months. And then after we built the prototype, in the early days, it was me on iMessage, where people could message me and I would manually look up hotel deals for them and send it over iMessage. But the crazy part was that people actually gave us their credit cards over iMessage, and we could book things. So okay.
They just trusted you.
Yeah, I guess so. So they're like, hey, there's something here, right? So we built some automation, and then we started to build some prototypes. We got, I think it was very early, like $10,000 in sales. And we say, okay, wow, there's something here. So we raised a seed round. I mean, it wasn't easy. I think we talked to probably close to 100 investors. I think 98 said no. One said maybe, one said yes. So we took the money and ran. We're like, okay, all right, we that's all we need. Took it and ran. And then at that time, I also got a letter in the mail. It's like, hey, you got 2 weeks to leave the country. We're like, okay. So we basically raised around, moved back to Canada. Still 2 of us moved to DMZ. That's where we started. And then they've been super helpful giving us space early on. And then grew a team from 2 to 6 or 7. Launched in July, and then the rest is history.
And I can only imagine how difficult it would have been to just go through 100 investors.
Yeah.
Did you just have another notebook of just
basically
all the investors in Silicon Valley and just
basically
send all your pitches?
Yeah, basically you go through them all, right? Because it's one of those things which is you just literally run up Sand Hill Road up and down. I think there were days where we had 6 meetings back to back, but it's mostly my co-founder. He's the one who did most of the work there. But yeah, it's tough. It's a process.
Wow. And so you said the rest is history. And so after that, you found product market fit in 2017. Was that a challenging process though, or did it happen relatively smoothly just because you kind of figured out an algorithm after that $10,000?
It was definitely definitely still a process, because I think our first hypothesis is can we build people want a really white glove concierge experience. So for example, we would have actual human agents do everything at San for you, like a travel agent concierge. But we kind of learned is that what happened was, people actually, 2 things. One is people didn't really know what they wanted. So they would say, oh, I want to be near the beach, 4 stars, free breakfast, whatever, right? So we would actually literally handpick the best option for that criteria for you, right? But then they're like, actually, why don't you tell me this other hotel? We're like, wait, but that hotel is downtown, 2 stars and whatever. We're like, yeah, but it's $100 cheaper. We're like, oh, well, I mean, I can't give you what you don't know, right? And similarly, we got other experiences where people say, oh, can you give me this recommendation? We do, and they're like, okay, thanks, it's a great recommendation, but I found a cheaper price elsewhere. So we kind of saw that this concierge service was a nice to have, but not a must have. People weren't dying for it, so we thought, okay, is there a way to build something that they were dying for? And people did, but sometimes when we got them a really good deal, they were dying for that. So we thought, okay, how do we make it really easy and a good experience, but focus on getting you a really good recommendation, a good deal as fast as possible. So we automated a lot of the things, and you can still talk to your agent. You can still get a white glove experience if you want, but otherwise you don't have to. You can talk to a bot, and you can use our web elements. You can do whatever, but our goal now is to get you the best deal in the fastest, easiest way possible.
And that over time proved out. What was that process like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we started to work. We saw the conversion were better, and we require way less humans. I think we started with everything 100% human, and now I think over 94% is automated.
What was the kind of tip-off point for you guys where you then conclude that we have product market fit?
I think it's when we really started to scale. I think when we hit like first $1 million in sales, that was really exciting. That was sort of a pivotal moment for our Series A. Raised our Series A in 2017, and then continued to grow. So yeah, I think that was kind of a really interesting and pivotal moment for that.
Yeah, and like you guys made a splash by getting Steph Curry on as an investor. But what was there kind of a motive to get Steph Curry on, or was it more like it kind of mutually happened?
Yeah, it kind of happened. It was great. It's always good to have a celebrity as an investor on your team, but I think it happened kind of sort of spontaneous as well. So for example, we were raising a round, and our lead investor, Telstra Ventures, they did a deal with Steph Curry before, Teams Woman, the esports game company. So we're like, okay, well, what other value add can you guys bring? And they're like, okay, well, we might be able to get Steph Curry involved. We're like, okay, sure, let's make it happen. So they put us in touch with his manager, pitched manager. His manager liked it. He showed us Steph. Steph's like, yeah, I'm down. Let's make it happen. We're like, okay, great. And that was it. Yeah, it's just him and his manager, and they make pretty fast decisions. And we're lucky and happy to have him on board.
Well, what were you most like excited about with the financing? Was it just the ability to get the funding to grow the company, or was it like the next stage? Like, what was it about the Series A financing that really got you excited?
Yeah, I think it's definitely an exciting moment for everybody. It's kind of a milestone, even though it's not really, but it still is, because it's very tangible. And for our employees, for our users, and for people who want to work with us, it really helps with legitimacy and helps with branding, helps with scaling the company. And it also means that we can bring on good people and continue to grow and scale and build great products.
And while you're doing all this, you also got a master's.
Oh yeah,
can't forget about that. You got a master's degree from Georgia Tech, doing master's in computer science and machine learning. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine is actually doing that master's right now.
Oh, that's great.
But you were doing this master's while you were running the company. Like I think I read like you're here at 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. and then you're finding time after that to do your coursework to do a master's degree.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of interesting. So I actually started that program when I was at Google, when I was really bored. And that was kind of a way to keep my mind fresh. That's how I started the program. It was one of my colleagues there. He was doing it one of the first cohorts. And he's like, yeah, I got this great program. It's a top 10 school. It's a full degree. So it's not a mono degree at all. It's a full degree. And he's like, it's like $8,000. I'm like, wow, what a good deal, right? I'm like, okay, well, I'll start, might as well. And then I started it, and it was great. And then even after I quit, when we were first starting our startup, it was still a really good experience, because the school is one of those things where it's like, that if you put X amount of effort in, you're going to get Y back. But in life and startups, you can put X in, you can get negative Y back, right? So for me, it was like a very much a motivational factor, where I knew that the world was chaotic and I don't know what I was doing in my startup life. But in school, I knew that if I worked hard, put in X amount of effort, I'm at least going to get Y back. So that's kind of how it started. And then I started building my company, and it was great. But then it got to a point where I got really busy. But then I was like, I'm almost done. I'm like 80% done. Might as well just finish the program. So yeah, I kind of just ended up taking the minimum requirements required for the specialization in machine learning. I still learn a lot. It's a great program, by the way. Great faculty, great teachers. And I ended up finishing that program, I think 3 years later. It's really cool. I like it. The faculty is great. Met with them in Atlanta last year, and just a fantastic program. And they're really inspired. I was really inspired by the fact that they're doing this to help make public education more affordable. So I think about traditionally a master's would cost anywhere between 30 to 100K. They're making it for 8K, right? And it's a top 10 school, so they're taking a big reputational hit. Potentially, and they're willing to do this because it's the right thing to do, and to help anybody who has internet, can speak English, can get a great education. And I think that's something that's really worthy of respect and admiration.
And you said when you actually chose to do the program, there was a way to kind of combat the chaos in your life. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me more about that feeling of chaos?
I think there's two things. One is like, at the surface level, when I first quit Google, I was super relieved, because there's no stress, no frustration, no politics, bureaucracy. But I think internally, and I didn't realize this, I was still very sort of scared in a way. I remember the first couple weeks I was getting nightmares at night for some reason, and I usually don't. And I think it's just a subconscious like lack of structure maybe. But you get over it, and then eventually, we follow the process, the running lean process. by Ash Moyer. It's a great book, one of my favorite books for a startup, and he tells you like step by step, what to do, what to say, what to ask, how to iterate, how to, what template to use when you interview customers. It's really great. So we follow that, and it helps give structure. But I think overall, like being comfortable with ambiguity is really important for any founder.
How did you get comfortable with ambiguity?
Maybe it's like experience, maybe it's like personality, maybe it's like having confidence in a way. But I think for me, ultimately, this is my third time doing a startup. So the first one, it was through the program incubator, second one through Velocity, whatever. So, and I also saw a lot of times with, being at LendUp, seeing, the growth of the company. And I think one of the things you build confidence is, you look at these guys and they're great and they're really smart, but ultimately they're not that much more different than you, right? Like, they struggle with the same struggles, getting customers, building product, and they just kind of work hard, think about it critically, and have a lot of confidence and think big. So I think that really helps with that perspective. And also, I think it's also a confidence in yourself, like in the sense of, if you believe your decision-making process helped you get to where you are today, then, you better believe that your process will help you get to where you need to be. Right? It's kind of like confidence in your own decision-making ability. And
in terms of actually building that confidence,
right?
When in the early days when investors are telling you no, like, does that, like, in one perspective, it could be a hit on your confidence when people are not giving you money, like they're rejecting you, or if customers are not choosing to do the product. How do you handle that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, fortunately, my co-founder handles more of that. I think he hears more no's than I do. But yeah, I think it's just part of being a founder, being resilient. Never giving up, and sort of having confidence in the data, right? And being data driven about it. Like if you're getting customers, you're growing. Like it doesn't matter if somebody says no, because deep down that you're building what people want.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of my past guests have been CEOs. Or like chief of marketing, and so you're actually, I think, probably the first CTO on the podcast. And so for you, then, as a CTO, like where's the boundary between the CEO and CTO? Like, where do you draw it in terms of what you as a CTO are responsible for?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm actually pretty involved. I think of myself more as a co-founder, right, in terms of doing what's needed to get the job done. So I actually do like I like a lot of strategy, a lot of product, a lot of like BD stuff. Yeah, so I think it's just doing what you need to get the job done. For me, it's the line's like pretty loose. Obviously you want to work together and stuff. You don't want to overdo work, but ultimately, like for me, it's about what matters the most. And I'll help out with fundraising, I'll help out with pitching, I'll help out with some BD stuff. Talk about strategy. And yeah, it's all sort of together.
And then on the technical side, because it is still a very technically intensive product that you guys are building. How in the weeds do you get? Do you enjoy going deep in? Like I know you must enjoy the theoretical side enough to do a master's.
Well, I'm not really a purely academic guy. I think for me, I like kind of seeing results and creating things. And in terms of getting deep in the weeds, I think that's something I used to do a lot when the company was smaller. But now I probably code less than 10% of my time. A lot of time spent on like code reviews, architecture, process, a lot of people stuff like. How do I level up my team? How do I build the right team? How do I structure them in my way? How do I make sure people are motivated? How do I, hire the right people? So a lot of time spent on people and process.
Oh wow! And honestly, when you say that, the fact that I'm surprised by it is weird, but because it just seems like that makes sense. And then for you, then in that kind of day to day, and also like in this kind of role that you are in, Elon Musk talks about how. When you are a founder of a company or a co-founder, it's like you're eating glass, like you're chewing glass. When does it feel like you're chewing glass?
Oh wow, I never thought it that way. That's kind of rough. I hope I never have to chew glass, but I think sometimes it can be tough in terms of some things not going the right way when you have to make a tough hire or fire call. Or sometimes you lose a customer, lose a sale. Sometimes you didn't get the funding you wanted. So I think those are tough moments. But luckily, I think for me, we've been pretty fortunate in our journey. I think we're both pretty optimistic and people. And yeah, you have ups and downs. And sometimes one day you're like, oh man, our biggest partner is going to shut us down. Next day you're like, wow, I just doubled my revenue, right? So you can get a lot of swings. But I think by being more sort of emotionally sound, I think it helps us deal with that.
And So then on that topic though, then is there? But when you're actually in the moment of things, sometimes it can feel like life and death. Like it can feel like, oh, if we don't hit this target, or if this investor doesn't say yes, it's all gonna be over. Looking back, like what moment kind of sticks out where when you were in it, you thought, oh God, this is so tough. I can't believe this is so tough, or like it's not working out. But in hindsight, you're like, I can't believe we sweated over that.
I think honestly, to be honest, we've been really lucky with our journey with SnapTravel. I think it's a well-known need. It's a big market. There are some moments which is like it's a really competitive market, but we've been able to work around that. Figure out our ways, learn our lessons, and make that work. So I think overall we've been really fortunate. There hasn't been like a huge moment. And maybe one thing was before our Series A, we were like, okay, we had an opportunity to hit a big milestone, like I think $1 million in sales, but we weren't going to get there in time for a big conference we're part of. So we thought, okay, is there is it worth it to spend an extra $20,000 on buying extra ads to make that happen for this big announcement, right? And that was kind of, I guess, a bigger decision where it's like, do we want to spend that much money that fast? And I was like, you know what, this makes sense because the return you get on this is way more worth it and something that we should do.
I'm guessing you continue to leverage checklists all the time.
I guess in a way.
And it's pretty cool. Like I also learned that you are a Forbes 30 under 30 for consumer technology. So belated congrats.
Thank you.
That's a big milestone. And I'm just curious on that process. Like, is it? Like, I'm imagining is it like a process where they like send you this beautiful envelope in your mail and say, hey, you've been selected?
No, not quite actually. I think Forbes that list is actually genius marketing because it's actually not 30 people under 30. It's 30 people in like 30 categories and like three regional awards, right? So you're talking about like a couple thousand people a year, right? And I think this way, Forbes doesn't give you anything. They don't give you a plaque. They don't give you an award. They don't give you like a freaking envelope. They just give you this virtual thing, and then the people on this list usually have some of a clout, right? So they'll share, the Forbes, and so it's a whole it's a great marketing thing for Forbes. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I still appreciate it and whatnot, but I think it's a genius move by Forbes to kind of build that list, stay on top of mind, and to obviously celebrate achievements and whatnot. But yeah, it's a smart move.
So then it's not something like did you apply for it?
Yeah, you do apply for it, but it was a pretty simple application process.
Okay, and then you just put it in, you just see how they judge you.
That's pretty much it, yeah.
Do you feel like your life has gone much different after that?
Not really, to be honest, because I don't talk about it that much. I think for me, it's still focused on building the business, like doing the things that matter, doing the day-to-day, building a great team, and building a good business.
And so then when you think about it, like on this journey of like building this company, what, like nowadays, what really like motivates you to do this?
I think a lot of it is just fun. It's really fun building a company, building things at scale. We have like over 3.5 million users now, right? And I think just seeing things at scale, seeing things work at scale, and then pushing the boundaries, like doing flights, hotels, tours, and activities, and all these things. And that's really exciting, seeing the new horizons and new ideas and verticals.
What about it? Like, what about, like, is there a specific thing that excites you more? Is it the number of lives you're impacting, number of users?
I don't know if there's like one specific thing, but I think it's just the fun of building something, continue to build stuff and create new, do new things of value, and also do new strategy. Like it's kind of like playing, like chess. It's like high dimensional chess where you can move different pieces. You only have so many resources, but it's like how do you allocate? And then when you make a bet and it pays off, it's like pretty exciting.
And in chess, there's there's a win,
right?
There's a game, there's an end of the game.
Right.
What is the end for this game?
Well, I think it's a standard corporate, it's like a corporate ladder, right? You become a VP or whatever. For startups, you exit, right? You raise a bunch of money, A, B, C, D, and then you either exit or you IPO. And it's the same thing.
But I'm guessing do you put much weight into that on a day-to-day?
Not on a day-to-day. I think it's important to build the right relationships and to create equity value. But day-to-day, it's a lot about still the building and creating a product and value.
Mm-hmm. And as you kind of hit upon this last final legs of the interview, I'm curious, if you had to pick the third most influential person in your life, who would that person be?
Sorry, one second. Third most influential person. Ooh, that's pretty hard. I don't even know how to stack rank that. Does it have to be a third? It can't be like one of the three.
Well, then tell me the three. Yeah.
Who
are the three?
Oh my goodness. Oh, this is pretty hard. Maybe I can give you one of the three. That's probably a little easier.
Okay. Give me one of the three.
Yeah, I think probably my or indirect boss or the founder of LendUp. I think I learned a lot about sort of how to build a story and how to tell a compelling story, because I got the chance to work with the CEO, and he was very much about how do we create a alternative to payday loans that were socially responsible and helps the customer, and how do we build a story and brand around that. So everything they did around the startup was about how do we make sort of lending for people who had access to little or no credit better, and just the way that he convinced the story, he was building the team, and the way he pitched to investors. I think that was just really motivating, and it was really also inspiring too, because I realized there's nothing uniquely special, or he's a smart guy, but he's not like a wizard, right? And everything he's doing was sort of the day-to-day tasks, but it's not like there wasn't any special magic, and just kind of seeing him, working with him, seeing him day to day, that was really, really inspiring. And it also kind of gave me the confidence to build a startup and think big, because I think they were always thinking about big, taking on the big competitors, changing the way people do things, and not being afraid to do something differently. And I think seeing that perspective and seeing a company grow from seed round to Series A to now I don't know, D or E, or maybe that's super inspiring.
And on the topic of thinking big, then what's the big thinking for SnapTravel?
Yeah, I think for us, it's how do we get to $1 billion in sales? And I think travel is a big enough space where you can make it. It's definitely possible to make that happen. But yeah, continue to think big about how we can get there. How do we scale? How do we move fast? I think we've always been thinking globally. Like, most of our customers are outside of Canada, like 90% or 95% outside of Canada. We book hotels all over the world, like in over 200 countries. So I think the idea is, how do we build a global brand from day one? And we do want to compete with the other brands like Expedia, Booking, whatnot. It's just how do we keep pushing ourselves, thinking big, and move fast.
And is there a belief that you have that you think goes against conventional wisdom?
This is like the Peter Thiel question.
Yeah. I think he uses that question a lot in his interviews too, or he used to, at least.
Yeah.
People probably expect it now.
Let me think. Yeah, I think some of my thinking on the margin is a little bit, I think different. I think a lot of people most people probably think in absolutes, like, oh, this is really expensive, or this is really cheap, or this is a lot of effort. But when you think about things on margin, it really changes. Like, for example, we were spending $20K in low return ad spend to get to 1 million in sales for the milestone. And in one way, you could say that's kind of a bad spend, because you're spending all this money. It's a expensive spend. But if you think about it on margin, it's, well, I'm spending $20K to raise like $8 million, right? So that's a very good spend. And obviously there's a confidence interval, and you got to justify your confidence, whatnot. But I think that's something that for me is something I always think about, and then really no matter the amount. And sometimes it kind of comes back to bite me. Like, for example, this price of like milk went up 50 cents, but it's actually like 20%. Like, what the fuck? Why did you go up 20%, right? But it's only 50 cents. So sometimes it kind of gets to me, but a lot of times when it comes to big numbers, it helps you kind of keep your thinking. And if you talk to any economist, really, it's life. A lot of it is on the margin. If you think about maximizing your utility curve, it's about finding that optimal point, where you're spending just the amount of time and money or effort and maximizing your utility and whatnot. So I think it's trying to continuously optimize on the margin. I think it's something that's applying that to life and startups. I think is something that is something I think might be slightly different.
Yeah, no, I can definitely agree with that. And so, Henry, this has been a really fun chat, and I really enjoyed chatting with you today. Thanks for sharing the story. Like, is there anything that we didn't cover today that you kind of wish that we had?
No, I think it's good. This is it's fun. I enjoyed the conversation as well. I think, one thing I'd say that probably, I talked to you about earlier is the traveling piece and living in different places. I think definitely, any person, any young person should be have an opportunity to really be in somewhere where the best is in the world. Like, for example, if you want to be, a banker, you probably should spend some time on Wall Street. If you want to be an actor, an actress, you probably should spend time in LA. And I think just being where some of the best talent is and to cut your teeth, I think really, really helps, because you're in the major leagues. Like, it's like you're seeing what the best in the world do, and that really gives, helps you build up your experience, your skills, your perspective. It really gives you, I think, that confidence to think big, because you've seen how it's done. You've seen how the best in the world do it, and you realize that, hey, this is not that different. And you end up pushing yourself to think more and do more, and I think that's invaluable.
Yeah, awesome. And they can use SnapTravel to find their hotel accommodations when they go travel to those places.
There we go. Yeah, there
exactly.
You go.
So then, how can they find SnapTravel? Should they just go to the website?
Yeah, just go to snaptravel.com, and you can check it out.
All right, awesome. Thanks for the interview, Henry, and I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, take care. All right, thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope the story was inspiring to you. Hopefully it also helped you expand your perspectives. Hopefully it also made you question the default path that you might have been going on, or the default beliefs you might have had. And maybe now it'll make you even think about doing something about it, doing something different, maybe challenging yourself, being courageous. Who knows? But regardless, I'm really happy that you took some time out of your day to listen to this fantastic story with my guest. And if you would like to somehow, in some way, contribute and help support the podcast, and maybe even just be part of the community that I'm trying to build with the greater OMD Ventures platform, really think about being a stakeholder in the platform. And the quick way to do that is to go to my website, oldmandan.com, and go to the stakeholders page. I believe it's oldmandan.com/stakeholder. And the link is also down below. And that's how you can figure out how you can subscribe, follow to get more updates on the free content, but at the same time also donate, and donate by actually just buying me a coffee. That's just how I put it. And you can buy me a coffee a month, coffee a week, or coffee every day of the year. And think about it as the way that, if you wanted to chat with me, you might just bring me out for coffee and buy me a coffee. Or if you wanted to bring one of my guests out to chat, you might buy them a coffee. So just think of it as I'm the service that's doing that for you, so you can just pay me in coffees. Don't worry, everything will still be free. It would just really help if you would like to show your support this way, so that I can use the coffee money to buy myself actual coffees, and also to buy my guests actual coffees, and use the leftover money to actually grow the platform, as well as even keep it operationally alive as well, because all this isn't really free, and it does take a lot of time to build it as well as operate it, and hopefully grow it further. So your support would be amazing if you would like to contribute. And so just check out the website, go to the stakeholders page, and read the different kind of benefits you might even get as a stakeholder. All right, thank you.